Welcome to Season 2 of Midwest Covencast Presents Weekend Reads. I'm Marilyn of Midwest Covencast. This season, we will continue the work of Season 1 and continue on to Book 2 of Heinrich, Cornelius, Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy or magic, in which he discusses celestial magic. It is our hope that Weekend Reads helps you in the goal of growing in your knowledge and practices. I hope you enjoy this week's installment. Chapter 37. Of the images of the faces, and of those images which are without the zodiac. There are, besides in the zodiac, 36 images, according to the number of faces, of the which, as Porphyry said, Teucer and Babylonian long since wrote, who was a most ancient mathematician, after whom the Arabians also wrote of these things. Therefore it is said that in the first face of Aries ascends the image of a black man, standing and clothed in a white garment, girdled about, of a great body with reddish eyes, and great strength, and like one that is angry. And this image signifies and causes boldness, fortitude, loftiness, and shamelessness. In the second face ascends a form of a woman, outwardly clothed with a red garment, and under it a white, spreading abroad over her feet. And this image causes nobleness, height of a kingdom, and greatness of dominion. In the third face arises the figure of a white man, pale with reddish hair, and clothed with a red garment, who carrying on the one hand a golden bracelet, and holding forth a wooden staff, is restless, and like one in wrath, because he cannot perform that good he would. His image bestows a wit, meekness, joy, and beauty. In the first face of Taurus ascends a naked man, an archer, harvester, or husbandman, and goes forth to sow, plow, build, people, and divide the earth according to the rules of geometry. In the second face ascends a naked man, holding in his hand a key. It gives power, nobility, and dominion over people. In the third face ascends a man in whose hand is a serpent and a dart, and is the image of necessity and profit, and also of misery and slavery. In the first face of Gemini ascends a man in whose hand is a rod, and he is, as it were, serving another. It grants wisdom and knowledge of numbers and arts, in which there is no profit. In the second face ascends a man whose hand is a pipe, and another being bowed down, digging the earth, and they signify infamous and dishonest agility, as that of jesters and jugglers. It also signifies labors and painful searchings. In the third ascends a man seeking for arms, and a fool holding in the right hand a bird, and in his left a pipe, and they are the significations of forgetfulness, wrath, boldness, jests, scurrilities, and unprofitable words. In the first face of Cancer ascends the form of a young virgin, adorned with fine clothes, and having a crown on her head. It gives acuteness of senses, subtlety of wit, and love of men. In the second face ascends a man clothed in comely apparel, or a man and woman sitting at a table and playing. It bestows riches, mirth, gladness, and the love of women. In the third face ascends a man, a hunter with his lance and horn, bringing out dogs for a hunt. The signification of this is the contention of men, the pursuing of those who fly, the hunting and possessing of things by arms and brawlings. In the first face of Leo ascends a man riding on a lion. It signifies boldness, violence, cruelty, wickedness, lust, and labors to be sustained. In the second ascends an image with hands lifted up, and a man on whose head is a crown. He hath the appearance of an angry man, and one that threatens, having in his right hand a sword drawn out of the scabbard, and in his left a buckler. It hath signification upon hidden contentions and unknown victories, and upon base men, and upon the occasion of quarrels and battles. In the third face ascends a young man, in whose hand is a whip, and a man very sad, and of an ill aspect. They signify love and society, and the loss of one's right for avoiding strife. In the face of Virgo ascends the figure of a good maid, and a man casting seeds. It signifies getting of wealth, ordering of diet, plowing, sowing, and peopling. In the second face ascends a black man clothed with a skin, and a man having a bush of hair holding a bag. They signifies gain, scraping together of wealth and covetousness. In the third face ascends a white woman, and a deaf, or an old man leaning on a staff. The signification of this is to show weakness, infirmity, loss of members, destruction of trees, and depopulation of lands. In the first face of Libra ascends the form of an angry man, in whose hand is a pipe, and the form of a man reading in a book. The operation of this is in justifying and helping the miserable and weak against the powerful and wicked. In the second face ascend two men furious and wrathful, and a man in a comely garment, sitting in a chair. And the signification of these is to show indignation against the evil, and quietness and security of life with plenty of good things. In the third face ascends a violent man, holding a bow, and before him a naked man, and also another man holding bread in one hand and a cup of wine in the other. The signification of these is to show wicked lusts, singings, sports, and gluttony. In the first face of Scorpio ascends a woman of good face and habit, and two men striking her. The operations of these are for comeliness, beauty, and for strifes, treacheries, deceits, detractions, and perditions. In the second face ascends a man naked, and a woman naked, and a man sitting on the earth, and before him two dogs biting one another, and their operation is for impudence, deceit, and false dealing, and for to lend mischief and strife amongst men. In the third face ascends a man bowed downward upon his knees, and a woman striking him with a staff, and it is the signification of drunkenness, fornication, wrath, violence, and strife. In the first face of Sagittarius ascends the form of man, armed with a coat of mail, and holding a naked sword in his hand. The operation of this is for boldness, malice, and liberty. In the second face ascends a woman weeping and covered with clothes. The operation for this is for sadness and fear of his own body. In the third face ascends a man like in color to gold, or an idle man playing with a staff. And the signification of this is in following our own wills, and obstinacy in them, and in activeness for evil things, contentions, and horrible matters. In the first face of Capricorn ascends the form of a woman, and a man carrying full bags, and the signification of these is for to go forth and to rejoice, to gain and to lose with weakness and baseness. In the second face ascends two women, and a man looking towards a bird flying in the air. And the signification of these is for the requiring those things which cannot be done, and for the searching after those things which cannot be known. In the third face ascends a woman chaste in body, and wise in her work, and a banker gathering his money together on the table. The signification of this is to govern in prudence, in covetousness of money, and in avarice. In the first face of Aquarius ascends the form of a prudent man, and of a woman spinning, and the signification of these is in the thought and labor for gain, in poverty and baseness. In the second face ascends the form of a man with a long beard, and the signification of this belongs to the understanding, meekness, modesty, liberty, and good manners. In the third face ascends a black and angry man, and the signification of this is in expressing insolence and impudence. In the first face of Pisces ascends a man carrying burdens on his shoulder, and well clothed. It hath his significant in journeys, change of place, and in carefulness of getting wealth and clothes. In the second face ascends a woman of a good countenance, and well adorned, and the signification is to desire and put oneself on about high and great matters. In the third face ascends a man naked, or a youth, and nigh him a beautiful maid, whose head is adorned with flowers, and it hath his signification for rest, idleness, delight, fornication, and for embracing of women. And thus far concerning the images of faces. Besides these, there are as yet 360 images in the zodiac, according to the number of the degrees whose forms Petrus de Abano hath described. Without the zodiac, there are also general figures, which Hyginus and Aratus describe for us, and very many particular ones, according to the number of faces and degrees existing therein, of all which to speak it would be too long. But of these the more principal are accounted. Pegasus, which prevails against the diseases of horses and preserves horsemen in battle. Then is Andromache, which begetteth love between husband and wife, so that it is said even to reconcile adulterers. Cassiopeia restores weak bodies and strengthens the members. Serpentarius chases away poisons and cures the biting of venomous beasts. Hercules gives victory in war. The dragon, with both the bears, makes a man crafty, ingenious, valiant, acceptable to the gods and men. Hydra confers wisdom and riches, and resists poisons. Centaurus bestows health and long old age. Ara conserves charity, and makes one acceptable to the gods. Cetus makes one amiable, prudent, happy, both by sea and land, and helps him to recover his lost goods. The ship affords security in the waters. The hare prevails against deceits and madness. The dog cures the dropsy, resists the plague, and also preserves from beasts and fierce creatures. Orion grants victory. The eagle gives new honors, and preserves the old. The swan frees from the palsy, and the quartan. Perseus frees from envy and witchcrafts, and preserves from lightnings and tempests. The heart preserves frenetical and mad people, and thus much may suffice to have been spoken. Chapter 38. Of the images of Saturn. But now, what images they did attribute to the planets, although of these things very large volumes have been written by the ancient wise men, so that there is no need to declare them here. Notwithstanding, I will recite a few of them. For they made of the operations of Saturn ascending in a stone, which is called the lodestone, the image of a man having the countenance of an hart, and camels set and sitting upon a char or dragon, holding in his right hand a scythe, and in his left hand a dart, which image they did hope would be profitable for the prolongation of life. For Albumazer in his book Sadar proves that Saturn conduces to the prolongation of life, where also he tells that certain regions of India, being subject to Saturn, their men are of a very long life, and die not unless of extreme old age. They made also another image of Saturn for length of days, and a sapphire at the hour of Saturn. Saturn ascending, or fortunately constituted, whose figure was an old man sitting upon an high chair, having his hands lifted above his head, and in them holding a fish or sickle, and under his feet a bunch of grapes, his head covered with a black or dusky colored cloth, and all his garments black or dark colored. They also make his same image against the stone and diseases of the kidneys, viz., in the hour of Saturn ascending, with the third face of Aquarius. They made also from the operations of Saturn an image for the increasing in power, Saturn ascending in Capricorn, the form of which was an old man leaning on a staff, having in his hand a crooked sickle, and clothed in black. They also made an image of melted copper, Saturn ascending in his rising, viz., in the first degree of Aries, or which is more true in the first degree of Capricorn, which image they affirm to speak with a man's voice. They made also out of the operations of Saturn, and also Mercury, an image of cast metal, like a beautiful man, which they promised would foretell things to come, and made it on the day of Mercury. On the third hour of Saturn, the sign of Gemini ascending, being the house of Mercury, signifying profit, Saturn and Mercury being in conjunction in Aquarius, in the ninth place of heaven, which is also called God. Moreover, let Saturn have a trine aspect on the ascendant, and the moon in like manner, and the sun have an aspect on the place of conjunction. Venus obtaining some angle may be powerful and occidental. Let Mars be combust by the sun, but let it not have an aspect on Saturn and Mercury. For they said that the splendor of the powers of these stars was diffused upon this image, and it did speak with men, and declare those things which are profitable for them. Chapter 39. Of the images of Jupiter. From the operations of Jupiter, they made from prolongation of life an image in the hour of Jupiter, Jupiter being in his exaltation, fortunately ascending, in a clear and white stone, whose figure was a man crowned, clothed with garments of a saffron color, riding upon an eagle or dragon, having in his right hand a dart, about as it were to strike it into the head of the same eagle or dragon. They made also another image of Jupiter, at the same convenient season, in a white and clear stone, especially in crystal, and it was a naked man crowned, having both his hands joined together, and lifted up, as it were deprecating something, sitting in a 4-footed chair, which is carried by 4-winged boys, and they affirm that this image increases felicity, riches, honor, and confers benevolence, and prosperity, and frees from enemies. They made also another image of Jupiter, for a religious and glorious life, and advancement of fortune, whose figure was a man having the head of a lion, or ram, and eagle's feet, clothed in saffron-colored clothes, and he was called the son of Jupiter. Chapter 40. Of the images of Mars. From the operations of Mars, they made an image in the hour of Mars, Mars being in the second face of Aries, in a martial stone, especially in a diamond, the form of which was a man armed riding upon a lion, having in his right hand a naked sword erected, carrying in his left hand the head of a man. They report that an image of this kind renders a powerful man in good and evil, so that he shall be feared of all, and whosoever carries it, they give him the power of enchantment, so that he shall terrify men by his looks when he is angry, and stupefy them. They made another image of Mars for the obtaining of boldness, courage, and good fortune in wars and contentions, the form of which was a soldier, armed and crowned, girt with a sword, carrying in his right hand a long lance, and they made this at the hour of Mars, the first face of Scorpio ascending with it. Chapter 41. Of the images of the sun. From the operations of the sun, they made an image at the hour of the sun, the first face of Leo ascending with the sun, the form of which was a king crowned, sitting in a chair, having a raven in his bosom, and under his feet a globe. He is clothed in saffron-colored clothes. They report that his image renders men invincible and honorable, and helps them to bring their businesses to a good end, and to drive away vain dreams, also to be prevalent against fevers and the plague, and they made it in a ballantine stone or a Reuben, at the hour of the sun, when it in his exaltation fortunately ascends. They made another image of the sun in a diamond, at the hour of the sun, it ascending in his exaltation, the figure of which was a woman crowned, with the gesture of one dancing and laughing, standing in a chariot drawn from 4 horses, having in her right hand a looking-glass or buckler, in the left a staff, leaning on her breast, carrying a flame of fire on her head. They report that this image renders a man fortunate and rich and beloved by all, and they made this image on a cornel stone at the hour of the sun ascending in the first face of Leo against lunatic passions which proceed from the combustion of the moon. Chapter 42. Of the images of Venus. From the operations of Venus, they made an image, which was available for favor and benevolence at the very hour it ascending into Pisces, the form of which was the image of a woman having the head of a bird and feet of an eagle, holding a dart in her hand. They made another image of Venus, for to get the love of women, in the lapis lazuli, at the hour of Venus, Venus ascending in Taurus, the figure of which was a naked maid, with her hair spread abroad, having a looking-glass in her hand, and a chain tied about her neck, and nigh her a handsome young man holding her with his left hand by the chain, but with his right hand making up her hair, and they both look lovingly on one another, and about them is a little winged boy holding a sword or a dart. They made another image of Venus, the first face of Taurus, or Libra, or Pisces, ascending with Venus, the figure of which was a little maid with her hair spread abroad, clothed in a long and white garments, holding a laurel, apple, or flowers in her right hand, in her left a comb. It's reported to make men pleasant, jocund, strong, cheerful, and to give beauty. Chapter 43. Of the images of Mercury. From the operations of Mercury, they made an image at the hour of Mercury, Mercury ascending in Gemini, the form of which was the handsome young man, bearded, having in his left hand a rod in which a serpent is twined about, in his right carrying a dart, having his feet winged. They report that his image confers knowledge, eloquence, diligence in the merchandising and gain, moreover to beget peace and concord, and to cure fever. They made another image of Mercury, Mercury ascending in Virgo, for good will, wit, and memory, the form of which was a man sitting upon a chair, or riding on a peacock, having eagle's feet, and on his head a crest, and in his left hand holding a cock or fire. Chapter 44. Of the images of the moon. From the operations of the moon, they made an image for travelers against weariness. At the hour of the moon ascending in its exaltation, the figure of which was a man leaning on a staff, having a bird on his head, and a flourishing tree before him. They made another image of the moon for the increase of the fruits of the earth, and against poisons and infirmities of children. At the hour of the moon, it ascending in the first face of Cancer, the figure of which was a woman, cornuded, riding on a bull, or a dragon, with 7 heads, or a crab. And she hath in her right hand a dart, in her left a looking-glass, clothed in white or green, and having on her head 2 serpents with horns twined together, and to each arm a serpent twined about, and to each foot one in like manner. And thus much spoken concerning the figures of the planets may suffice. Chapter 45. Of the images of the head and tail of the dragon of the moon. They made also the image of the head and tail of the dragon of the moon, namely between an aerial and fiery circle, the likeness of a serpent, with the head of an hawk tied about them, after the manner of the great letter theta. And they made it when Jupiter with the head obtained the midst of heaven, which image they affirmed to avail much for the success of petitions, and would signify by this image a good and fortunate genius, which they would represent by this image of the serpent. For the Egyptians and the Phoenicians do extol this creature above all others, and say it is a divine creature, and hath a divine nature, for in this is a more acute spirit, and a greater fire than in any other, which thing is manifested both by his swift motion without feet, hands, or any other instruments, and also that it often renews his age with his skin, and becomes young again. But they made the image of the tail like as when the moon eclipsed in the tail, or ill affected by Saturn or Mars. And they made it to introduce anguish, infirmity, and misfortune, and they called it the evil genius. Such an image a certain Hebrew had included in a golden belt full of jewels, which Blanche, the daughter of the Duke of Bourbon, either willingly or ignorantly, bestowed on her husband Peter, King of Spain, the first of that name, with which, when he was girt, he seemed to be himself compassed about with a serpent, and afterwards, finding the magical virtue fixed in the girdle, for the cause he forsook his wife. Chapter 46. Of the images of the mansions of the moon. They made also images for every mansion of the moon. In the first, for the destruction of someone, they made in an iron ring the image of a black man in a garment made of hair, and girdled round, casting a small lance with his right hand. They sealed this in black wax, and perfumed it with liquid storax, and wished some evil to come. In the second, against the wrath of the prince, or for reconciliation with him, they sealed in white wax and mastic the image of a king crowned, and perfumed it with lignum aloes. In the third, they made an image in a silver ring, whose table was square, the figure of which was a woman well clothed, sitting in a chair, her right hand being lifted up on her head, and they sealed it and perfumed it with musk, camphor, and calamus aromaticus. They affirmed that this gives happy fortune and every good thing. In the fourth, for revenge, separation, enmity, and ill will, they sealed in red wax the image of a soldier sitting on an horse, holding a serpent in his right hand. They perfumed it with red myrrh and storax. In the fifth, for the favor of kings and offices, and good entertainment, they sealed in silver the head of a man, and perfumed it with sanders. In the 6th, for to procure love between two, they sealed in white wax 2 images, embracing one another, and perfumed them with lignum aloes and amber. In the 7th, for to obtain every good thing, they sealed in Siloam the image of a man well clothed, holding up his hands to heaven, as it were praying and supplicating, and perfumed it with good doors. In the 8th, for victory in war, they made a seal of tin, being an image of an eagle, having the face of a man, and perfumed it with brimstone. In the 9th, to cause infirmities, they made a seal of lead, being the image of a man, wanting his privy parts, shutting his eyes with his hands, and they perfumed it with rosin of the pine. In the 10th, to facilitate childbearing, and to cure the sick, they made a seal of gold, being the head of a lion, and perfumed it with amber. In the 11th, for fear, reverence, and worship, they made a seal of a plate of gold, being the image of a man riding on a lion, holding the ear thereof in his left hand, and in his right holding forth a bracelet of gold, and they perfumed it with good odors and saffron. In the 12th, for the separation of lovers, they made a seal of black lead, being the image of a dragon fighting with a man, and they perfumed it with the hairs of a lion, and a sapphotida. In the 13th, for the agreement of the married couples, and for the dissolving of charms against copulation, they made a seal of the images of both a man in red wax, of the woman in white, and caused them to embrace one another, perfuming it with lignum aloes and amber. In the 14th, for divorce and separation of the man from the woman, they made a seal of red copper, being the image of a dog biting his tail, and they perfumed it with the hair of a black dog and black cat. In the 15th, for to obtain friendship and goodwill, they made the image of a man sitting and inditing of letters, and perfumed it with frankincense and nutmegs. In the 16th, for to gain much merchandising, they made a seal of silver, being the image of a man sitting upon a chair, holding a balance in his hand, and they perfumed it with well-smelling spices. In the 17th, against thieves and robbers, they sealed with an iron seal an image of an ape, and perfumed it with the hair of an ape. In the 18th, against fevers and pains of the belly, they made a seal of copper, being the image of a snake, holding his tail above his head, and they perfumed it with the hartshorn, and reported the same seal to put to flight serpents, and all venomous creatures from the place where it is buried. In the 19th, for facilitating birth and provoking the menstruation, they made a seal of copper, being the image of a woman holding her hands upon her face, and they perfumed it with liquid storax. In the 20th, for hunting, they made a seal of tin, being the image of Sagittarius, half a man and half an horse, and they perfumed it with the head of a wolf. In the 21, for the destruction of some body, they made the image of a man with a double countenance, before and behind, and they perfumed it with brimstone and jet, and did put it in a box of brass, and with it brimstone and jet, and the hair of him whom they would hurt. In the 22nd, for the security of runaways, they made a seal of iron, being the image of a man with wings on his feet, bearing an helmet on his head, and they perfumed it with argent feve. In 23rd, for destruction of wasting, they made a seal of iron, being the image of a cat, having a dog's head, and they perfumed it with the hairs of a dog's head, and buried it in the place where they did pretend to hurt. In the 4th and 20th, for the multiplying of herds of cattle, they took the horn of a ram, bull, or goat, or of that sort of cattle which they would increase, and sealed in it, burning with an iron seal, the image of a woman giving suck. Note, breastfeeding, her son, and they hanged it on the neck of that cattle who was the leader of the flock, or they sealed it in his horn. In the 25th, for the preservation of trees and harvests, they sealed in the wood of a fig tree the image of a man planting, and they perfumed it with the flowers of the fig tree, and did hang it on the tree. In the 26th, for love and favor, they sealed in white wax and mastic the image of a woman washing and combing her hairs, and they perfumed it with things smelling very well. In the 27th, for to destroy fountains, pits, medicinal waters, and baths. They made of red earth the image of a man, winged, holding in his hand an empty vessel, and perforated for the image being burnt. They did put in the vessel asafoetida and liquid storax, and they did overwhelm and bury it in the pond or fountain which they would destroy. In the 28th, for to gather fishes together, they made a seal of copper, being the image of a fish, and they perfumed it with the skin of a sea fish, and did cast it into the water, wheresoever they would have the fish to gather together. Moreover, together with the foresaid images, they did write down also the names of the spirits and their characters, and did invocate and pray for those things which they pretended to obtain. Chapter 47. Of the images of the fixed Bohemian stars. But now for the operations of the fixed stars, according to Hermes' opinion, under the head of Algol. They made an image whose figure was the head of a man with a bloody neck. They report that it bestows good success to petitions, and makes him who carries it bold and magnanimous, and preserves the members of the body sound. Also, it helps against witchcraft, and reflects evil endeavors and wicked incantations upon our adversaries. Under the constellation of Pleiades, they made the image of a little virgin, or the figure of a lamp. It's reported to increase the light of the eyes, to assemble spirits, to raise winds, to reveal secret and hidden things. Under Adelbora, they made an image after the likeness of a god, or of a flying man. It gives riches and honor. Under the goat, they made an image, the figure of which was, as it were, a man willing to make himself merry with musical instruments. It makes him who carries it acceptable, honorable, and exalted before kings and princes, and helps the pain of the teeth. Under the greater dog star, they made an image of an hound and a little virgin. It bestows honor and goodwill, and the favor of men and aerial spirits, and gives power to pacify and reconcile kings, princes, and other men. Under the lesser dog star, they made the image of a cock, or of 3 little maids. It confers the favor of the gods and spirits and men. It gives power against witchcrafts, and preserves health. Under the heart of Leo, they made the image of a lion or cat, or the figure of an honorable person sitting in a chair. It renders a man temperate, appeases wrath, and gives favor. Under the tail of Ursa Major, they made the image of a pensive man, or of a bull, or of the figure of a calf. It avails against incantations, and makes him who carries it secure in his travels. Under the wing of Corvus, they made the image of a raven or snake, or of a black man clothed in black. This makes a man choleric, bold, courageous, full of thoughts, a backbiter, and causes naughty dreams. Also, it gives the power of driving away evil spirits, and of gathering them together. It is profitable against the malice of men, devils, and winds. Under the spike, they made the image of a bird, or of a man laden with merchandise. It confers riches, and makes one overcome contentions. It takes away scarcity and mischief. Under Alchemeth, they made the image of an horse or wolf, or the figure of a man dancing. It is good against fevers. It astringes and retains the blood. Under Elphira, they made the image of an hen, or a man, crowned and advanced. It bestows the good will and love of men, and gives chastity. Under the heart of Scorpio, they made the image of a man armed with a coat of mail, or the figure of a scorpion. It gives understanding and memory. It makes a good color, and aids against evil spirits, and drives them away, and binds them. Under the vulture, they made the image of a vulture, or hen, or of a traveler. It makes a man magnanimous and proud. It gives power over devils and beasts. Under the tail of Capricorn, they made the image of an hart, or goat, or of an angry man. It bestows prosperity and increases wrath. These are the images of some of the fixed stars, which they command to be engraven on their stones under them. Chapter 48. Of geomantical figures, which are the middle between images and characters. There are moreover certain other figures, framed by the number and situation of the stars, and ascribed both to elements and also to the planets and signs, which are called geomantical, because the geomantical diviners do reduce the points of their lot projected by the excess of parity or imparity into those figures, and they also, being engraved or imprinted under the dominion of their planets and signs, do conceive the virtue and power of images. And these figures are as middle between images and characters. But whosoever desires exactly, the natures, qualities, proprieties, conditions, significations, and nativities of these figures, let him read the volumes of geomancy, but they are number 16, whose names and figures are these. Note: you can find this chart at MidwestCovencast.com. Chapter 49. Of images, the figure whereof is not after the likeness of any celestial figure, but after the likeness of that which the mind of the worker desires. There remains as yet another manner of images, not according to the similitude of celestial figures, but according to the similitude of that which the mind of the worker desires, of whose they are the effigies and representation. So to procure love, we make images embracing one the other, to discord, striking one the other, to bring misery or destruction as damage to a man, or house, or city, or anything else, we make images distorted, broken in members, and parts after the likeness and figure of that thing which we would destroy or damify. The magicians advise us that in casting or engraving images, we would write upon it the name of the effect, and this on the back when evil, as destruction, on the belly when good, as love. Moreover, in the forehead of the image let be written the name of the species or individual which the image represents, or for whom or against whom it is made. Also on the breast let the name of the sign or face ascending, and Lord thereof be written. Also the names and characters of its angles. Moreover, in making the image, they advise that prayer for the effect for which it is made be used. All which Albertus Magnus, in his Speculo, affirms. Now they use images, being made diversely, according to the virtues thereof. Sometimes they hang them or bind them to the body. Sometimes they bury them under the earth, or a river. Sometimes they hang them in a chimney over the smoke, or upon a tree, and they be moved by the wind. Sometime with the head upward, and sometimes downward. Sometimes they put them into hot water, or into the fire, for they say, as the workers of the images do affect the image itself, so doth it bring the like passions upon those to whom it was ascribed, as the mind of the operator hath dictated it. As we read that Nectanebus, the magician, made images of ships with wax after that manner, and art that when he drowned those images in water, that the ships of his enemies were in like manner drowned in the sea and hazarded. Now that part of astrology which is writ concerning elections teaches us that the constellations also are to be observed for the making of images and such like. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Midwest Covencast Presents Weekend Reads. We'll be back next week as we continue through Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy or magic, Book 2, Celestial Magic. To access podcast extras and so much more, you can visit MidwestCovencast.com. Otherwise, I hope you'll visit us on social media at Midwest Covencast on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, and at Midwest Coven on Twitter. Until next time, Coven. Blessed be.